Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Piano Cleveland's Listening Series. This is your series to prepare you for the 2021 Cleveland International Piano Competition, which is coming up July 9 to August 11. My name is Yaron Kohlberg, and I'm president of Piano Cleveland. So what is this listening series? We have the competition coming up. We have some of the world's best young pianists coming to Cleveland to compete. And many times, I have people coming up to me and saying, you know, we really enjoyed this performance that we heard, but we're not exactly sure what we heard. And we just want to take it to the next level, our understanding and our excitement. And this is exactly what this listening series is about. In the next 3 sessions, the one today, next week, and in 2 weeks, we're going to take you through some things that maybe you should know when you listen to piano music. And there is even a reward for that. This is your opportunity to be a part of the jury at the Cleveland International Piano Competition. This is going to be a special jury called the Armchair Juror. So extremely exciting. So what that means, once you go through these three sessions, and you're going to have a better understanding, regardless if you're a regular concert goers or you never went to a piano concert before, you're gonna suddenly say, oh, now I get it. This is so great. This is so beautiful. And you're gonna form your own opinions and be a part of that juror there. And not only that you're gonna be part of the jury, you're also gonna be able to vote and influence a $1,500 prize to one of the contestants during the competition. So in July, we're going to send out some electronic ballots, and this way you can vote. You don't have to listen to all the sessions, although we highly recommend it, of course. When we originally planned this series a couple of years ago, we were very excited to work with 3 of our local partners. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we had to shift our plans. And while this virtual format, of course, we hope that it's as engaging as it would have been live, we wanted to make sure to continue to support our partners in these challenging times. Here we have a swag bag in which maybe some of you have already received some very interesting surprises. We have here a bandana by the Praxis Fiber Workshop in Waterloo Art District, used dyes that they grew themselves to create this beautiful piece. We also have this glass by the Bop Stop, our very, very dear hosts for tonight. This is a local jazz club that has been bringing music to everyone during the pandemic through live stream performances, opening their doors this month. Big thanks to Gay Pollack and also to Steve for taking this project on. And we also have a Gilmore notebook. This is a Steinway Select School, thanks to the generosity of Matthew Figge. And a couple of our own Piano Cleveland swag armchair jury button for you to wear anytime you feel like during the competition or even when you're at home. And we also have a magnet and a bottle. In case you haven't received one of these yet, so please contact us and we'll make sure to get it to you. So, in the spirit of supporting our partners, I'm glad to introduce a little bit about the Bop Stop. Let's hear a bit about them.
Bop Stop. Situated on the edge of Hingetown, you'll find Bop Stop at 2920 Detroit Avenue. It is simply put, Cleveland's premier music venue for live jazz. Bop Stop is an award-winning acoustically pristine performance space where every seat is a perfect seat. Plus, it's the only Steinway jazz venue in Cleveland, thanks to a generous donation. Patrons can eat and drink with the added benefit of supporting the Music Settlement's efforts toward education in the Cleveland area. Bop Stop stage has featured more than 150 Grammy winners and nominees, so you can be sure that a night out at Bop Stop is always worthwhile.
So before I introduce today's first presentation, I would like to say a special thank you to the Leonard Krieger Fund for really, it is thanks to their sponsorship and their generosity that we're able to host this series and bring it to you. So, our first session is now about to start, and I would like to introduce Marshall Griffith, our very, very dear friend, who is on the faculty of the Cleveland Institute of Music and is also a distinguished alumnus of CIM in the category Composer Virtuoso. He's a well-known pianist locally and has been a soloist with the Cleveland Pops Orchestra, as well as other regional orchestras. We also have, as a guest musician, Virginia Crabtree, who is a graduate of CIM and has an active performing career and a teaching studio. She has won numerous awards and performed at the Sydney Olympics. Both Marshall and Virginia are resident artists of the Cleveland Clinic and are community artists for Piano Cleveland. And now, without further ado, I would like to welcome Marshall and Virginia.
Hit it, Virginia. I love a piano. I love a piano. I love to hear somebody play. I'm so delighted to be invited to hear a long-haired genius play. So you can keep your mouthpiece and your flute. Nice. Just give me a piano. I like to stand right next to an upright or a well-toned baby grand. Thank you, Virginia. So what on earth is a piano? Well, to start with, the word piano is the Italian word for soft. So here I am, I'm playing a soft. Well, I saw a Sophia Loren movie not too long ago, and she's yelling at her children in the park, and she says, piano, piano. And she's telling them, be quiet, to shut up, be quiet. And that's simply what the word means. So how does this work? I love a soft. It's a terrible song title. So love a piano is way better, better syllables. Now the Italian word for loud is forte. And the original predecessor, or the most immediate predecessor of the piano, was called a forte piano. And we have a clip for you to hear an actual Cristofori piano, forte, or forte piano. It was invented around 1700, and let's hear that clip. The forte piano was the instrument of Haydn, Mozart, and early Beethoven. What you just heard now was a little Scarlatti, which would also have been very appropriate. Over the time, the name changed from pianoforte from forte piano to pianoforte, and now people just call it a piano. So things change, as things do. Loud and soft we'll get to in a minute, but let's hear another clip of the predecessor of the forte piano, which is the harpsichord. And it's a very different sound, but they are all keyboard instruments. So what's the big deal about playing soft and loud at the same time. Well, I'm going to get to that in a minute, but most instruments can do exactly that, as Virginia is about to demonstrate with a little fragment from The Seasons by Vivaldi. She'll play loud, then soft. There's another thing that instruments, the voice and other instruments can do that the piano cannot do, which is the word crescendo, which means to get louder. The only way I can get louder is to play a note or a chord soft and then play it louder and louder. I can't play one thing and have it get louder, but the flute can easily do this. The other thing the piano can't do is something called vibrato, which means literally to vibrate. So Virginia's going to play a tone with no vibrato or straight tone and then go into this vibrating sound called vibrato. Thank you, Virginia. Now, I could stand here all day and wiggle my finger on this note, and I'm never going to get it to vibrato. This is just not going to happen. It may look good, but it's not going to work. So what's the big deal? Well, prior to the invention of the forte piano, instruments like the organ or the harpsichord that you just heard, once the pedals and mechanisms are set, no change of volume is possible by human touch. Now, harpsichordists do all kinds of clever things with articulation and rolled chords and all kinds of things, and we'll have another harpsichord demonstration another day. And of course, the organ, you can have the organ set to the loudest possible, all the pipes open, go over and just gently put a chord down, and it will be super loud. So human touch was not part of the equation. So if we have the possibilities with human touch as part of the controlling of expression, then all sorts of things. So what was just played a moment ago, I can play flat and even dynamically, or I could, I could change all the, which I probably would not do, but it's possible with the instrument. Now, the other thing that we can do also is the way we touch the keys comes into three gigantic categories. There's as smooth as possible, called legato, and then there's staccato, and then there's sort of an in-between, portamento. So all this, I could legato, or, and eventually this is all part of what's considered interpretation. Scores are marked, often with very clear markings, about how the composer wants the pianist to articulate and play dynamically. But many pieces have very few markings, and the pianist is then allowed to interpret what they most genuinely feel about the music. And that's part of what, in a sense, the competition's all about. We hear a number of people play the same piece, but they don't necessarily play it all the same, because they've decided to use either different touch here, different volume here. What does piano mean? It's a range. It's not like an absolute dynamic. So that's all interpretive, and that's what makes the competition interesting in that sense. Listening to 30, 20 people play the same piece of music and feeling that that one was the most moving or the most touching. So, nevertheless, the piano has changed like everything else. It's changed a lot over, especially in the last 50 years. Early pianos only had 52 keys and very few metal parts. Pianos aren't even standard today. Most range from 76 to 102. The standard is what we have in front of us here today, which is an 88 key, 52 white, and 36 black. But on many early keyboards, the color was reversed. White and black were different. It's classified both as a string instrument, because essentially it's a harp in a box, and it's also a percussion instrument because you actually physically attack the keys in the same way that a percussion would use their hands or sticks to hit on instruments. So we're going to talk a little bit more. One of the things too is it's really even hard to imagine exactly how complicated all of this is. The modern piano, this one, has 12,000 individual parts. So there's a lot of variance in the kinds of sounds that various pianos make. So nevertheless, we're going to start now with a little bit of discussion of how piano music is organized and the way things are done. There are, on the floor here, 3 pedals, 1, 2, 3, right, left, and middle. And the right one is called the sostenuto, or sustain pedal. And if I play this piece, well, frankly, it doesn't sound very good because I can't sustain. There's too many things I've got too much range thing. But if I put that right pedal down, and I think you can see when I put this right pedal down, these black things, which are called dampers, come up. And now when I hit a note, it rings. It'll ring for a long time if I hit the note really loud and less if I hit it softly. But eventually it'll die out. As we used to say in piano lessons, that pianists are just in a constant state of decay. You know, that's what we're all just decaying in sound. You know, we can't do anything about it. Once it's hit, it's over. So if I put the pedal down and these dampers come up, then all this can be sustained. And I can just let that ring as long as it will hold up. And that's called the sustain pedal. Now, the one on the left side, and if you look inside any piano, you'll see that there is one damper for a note. One comes up, but it's actually hitting 3 strings, not just one. Down here, there's only one because these lower ones are quite powerful and don't need that. And some pianos way at the top only have 2 and not 3, it just depends. So when you're hitting all 3, you're getting the richer tone of the environment. But the pedal on the left is called the soft pedal, and what it does is move the entire mechanism of the piano over so that it only hits 1 string instead of 3. And sometimes that pedal is called the una corda, or 1 string. So here's a little Brubeck piece where I'm going to play it without the soft pedal. I'll play it somewhat quietly because it's meditational and so on. Mostly it's a color change. There's a little bit of dullness to the sound, but it's a color that can be really expressive and very beautiful. And it's used as players indicate. Although some composers will put in their tre corda, don't use a soft pedal, or they'll put in una corda to be absolutely clear that's exactly what they want. Now, this pedal in the middle, and a lot of pianos don't even have them. Most concert instruments do, of course. And it does something really cool. When I have the right pedal down, all the dampers come up. So I could strum these strings, and they're all gonna vibrate, you know, just like a harp. But the middle pedal allows you to only allow certain notes to ring. In other words, I put 3 notes down, and you might be able to see that there are three notes up, 3 dampers up. Now when I strum, only those sound. Now apparently the inventors of the piano ran out of scotch because they named the inside pedal the sostenuto pedal, which is the same name as the right pedal. So they needed another inspirational moment to come up with a better name for how things work. But nevertheless, that's neither here nor there. Now, so here's a piece by Debussy. You don't really see the middle pedal used much by music in Beethoven and so forth and so on. But in the Impressionist music and 20th century music, I'm going to play these really high chords and a really low chord, then put that pedal down, and only those are going to ring, and I could play these nice and crisply however I want. But I can use the other pedal simultaneously to make those connect. So this can be really fun to do. Oops. And if I let everything go, that note's still ringing. So it can carry a phrase in a way that's unique. That's a particular piece by Debussy called The Sunken Cathedral from one of the Prelude sets. Now, I've been talking about this piano and how it works and so forth. And thank goodness for Steinway for loaning us this lovely piece of equipment this evening. This is what happens when you hit a key. I hit the key, and this thing is called the damper. And the reason I brought this is because even with our elaborate camera setup, you can't see into the piano far enough to see how this works. And then that's the string, and that's the damper. So when I hit that and I hold it down, the damper will stay up until I let go of it. What I'm saying is if I put the pedal down, then even if I let go of this, this is going to stay up and ring. So there's a lot, you can see there's a lot of pieces here, and there's all kinds of sophistication into how those are engineered and manipulated. And Horowitz traveled with his own technician and own tuner for most of his career because he wanted the piano to be exactly a certain way, to feel a certain way. How far do the keys go down before you make sounds? All these things are variables. So luckily the piano competition is always done at a place where there are superior pianos, and there are technicians around to save the day when things go foul, which does happen from time to time. Now, piano sounds themselves. Well, we have melodies. Ode to Joy. And those are single notes, one at a time. But you have also then like support beams in a building. Those are called harmonies or chords. It's usually 2 or 3 to 4 notes or more played simultaneously, and you put the two together, you have a melody and some chords. So the two things together make up essentially what most music is. Now, chords in the middle of the piano are really common. Or Beatles. One of my favorite pieces to play is the E minor Chopin Prelude, which has a lovely slow-moving melody with chords galore in left hand. And the way pianists fake things like crescendo, when I'm playing this long note in the melody, it's already dying. It's already in the process of decaying, but I can make my left hand make it sound like I'm making a crescendo like Virginia did. And these little subtleties are what make interesting performances and choices that performers make, what they extract from the score, what they perceive as what hopefully the composer wanted as much as possible. Chords are often divided up instead of blocking like that, and the word to divide is arpeggio. So we have arpeggios. We can can take a chord. All pianists practice arpeggios like crazy. And I mean, you just can't, I'm sure you're on, say you'd finish your chord drill and then you just do it again because you have to learn your chords inside and out. One of the famous accompaniment patterns made of chords was made by a keyboard composer named Domenico Alberti, and he had this alternating pattern. So you hear this all the time in classical period pianos. So you hear this frequently. The arpeggio itself, even though it is a chord, a building block, it can be a melody. Just last Saturday, we went to the racetrack down there, you know. All those notes that the bugle player plays for the Kentucky Derby are just notes made up of chords. Happy days are here again. All that, even their national anthem. Mostly chord tones. Now, the arpeggio can also then be perceived as melody, and here Virginia and I are going to play a little short moment from a Beethoven piano sonata, we're just doing it with piano and flute, where Virginia and I are basically just playing notes of the chord, and it sort of sounds like a melody. So hit it, Virginia. So these are sounds that you hear, and any piece of music is going to be, those are the things that you often hear. Now the arpeggio is most traditionally used as an accompaniment. So here's a little Andrew Lloyd Webber. And you often hear pianists at the end of their phrases roll off an arpeggio to end the piece. I had played earlier this little fragment from Brahms. So we heard that in the Prelude, so I won't play that again. The sound, another sound you hear all the time is where, it's like a hymn, where the chords and the melody sort of move at the same rate of speed. Together at the same time. Well, this is a very common piano sound. Here's Chopin Prelude in C minor, where I'm playing the first and last phrase. And I chose that also just to demonstrate, again, I played the first phrase, that first phrase is marked loud or forte, and the second phrase is marked soft piano. But it's that sound. Now, one of the things that also pianists have to learn how to do is to play the melody and the chords with one hand, usually the right, although it can be done left. Which doesn't seem all that particularly difficult, but when you stop to think about it, that means the melody, which is on the higher part, is played by the weakest of your fingers. And the chord part is played by your strongest fingers. So to reverse that and make sure the melody comes out and is not overcome by the chords, it takes a little bit of doing. And you hear this. Chopin thought it was hard enough that he included this very famous piece, which I'm sure you recognize, as one of the etudes that he wrote for piano. Seems relatively simple. The most famous piece I know that does this is the Moonlight Sonata, where there's this lovely melody and left-hand chords, but the inside of this hand is doing all the work. And that's a piece many people are familiar with, but to play that on the piano it takes some practice, that's for sure. Another word you hear in musical compositions is the word scale, which is from the Greek word for ladder, which makes sense, stepwise thing. And so we have moving up notes one at a time upward. There are many kinds of scales. You know, there's many times, all kinds of scales. And we practice scales. We practice scales from the time you start taking piano lessons. You play scales a lot of the time because so much music is made up of scale material, melodies especially. And often you hear it more as a flourish arrangement at the beginning, melody. Now just scales as flourish. There's not really a melody in there. It's just part of the instrument, the piano, how music is organized for that. So scales can be melody. And as there's also the chromatic scale. The word chromatic is Greek for chromos, which means small unit. Chromosome, like in the word chromosome, or chromacolor, which was a film that was made by a Kodak, and chromos means all colors. So we have as small an interval as I can move on the piano, you know. Those are called chromatic scales, and you often hear them, you know, done fairly quickly and so forth and so on. But we're going to play a little moment here from Carmen, Bizet's Carmen, where the melody that Virginia's going to play is a chromatic scale that descends. So we hear these scales and all these things, all part of just almost every piece of music. Now, the piano's got different registers, they're called. And the first one is a really, really low register down in the bottom here. And you hear this all the time in various guises. Here's a little Billy Joel. Like you're imitating bass, in that case sort of a disco bass. Now the next piece is from Beethoven's Waldstein Sonata, and it starts out with this conversation between really high material and really, really low. So I'm just going to play the low part. So all the pianists out there, I'm leaving out the high part on purpose. So it's got a real juicy sound, but it doesn't have to be just sort of chords and things. Melodies can be played in the low register. This is the theme from Exodus by Ernst Gold, where the melody. the melody can be down in there, and it's almost like you're hearing a different instrument, like a cello or a bass or something. The G minor Prelude by Chopin, the melody is in the bass, the entire left hand, and it ends with this wonderful flourish. So there's a lot of power down there, and you have to really be careful that you don't overdo and so forth. The middle of the piano is where you hear almost everything. And here's an example of the middle register, which is lovely, and here it is. And you hear a lot of piano music in the middle. Now the top register, when Bach was first introduced to the very early forte piano, his only complaint was that the top of the piano was really thin and not very usable. And in many ways, that's still true. It is a thinner part of the instrument. Not a lot goes on up there, frankly, in terms of register. I mean, I can't, you know, there are plenty of pieces that use this final bit of the piano, but very, very few. So if you play Mozart up really high, it sounds like a music box. So that high register, there's a thinness to it, and especially if the instrument only has 2 strings up there instead of 3. This one has 3, so it's pretty good. But not super high also sounds great. Second theme from the Waldstein Sonata. Now, what is really the most artistic, though, is these 3 ranges are often combined in one piece, or one section. So here we have a Chopin ballade where there's a melody on top. Then there's a middle voice. Then a low voice. Then back to the up. So all together with everybody going. And to bring out all those things is part of what interpretation and how clearly you can do it and how much you practice to do it. One of the most beautiful sections of any piano piece ever written is also from a Chopin F-sharp major prelude, where you hear this section where we have this lovely melody on top. Then there's a tenor or middle voice. Then a low voice. You put all that together, so controlling all that takes a little bit of doing. So that's sort of, I wanted to tell you about the piano. It's, of course, my favorite instrument to play. No injury to Virginia there. So I hope that helps illustrate how music is played on the piano, a modern piano. But if you go to a competition, then you're going to see all kinds of other things on the programs. And don't be, worried about it. There are many things, and I'm just going to illuminate a few things that you see on programs. It'll say Beethoven Sonata, blah, 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 blah. And then it'll say Allegro or Andante or Largo. And all those are tempo indications. And so if you really want to learn more about this, you need to get your Italian dictionary out and find out what all those words mean. But basically, Prestissimo is fast and Largo is slow, and there's a bunch in between. Why are they all in Italian? Well, most early music publishers were in Italy. So they used Italian terms. There are thousands of modifiers, like not too fast, I mean in English, not too fast, fast but not this, and it just goes on and on. But I was looking for this presentation of the most unusual modifier that I have ever seen, and it's only used twice as far as I can see in the entire literature, whether it's orchestral or opera, which is the word aperto, which is the Italian word for bold. Mozart usually only uses it twice, once in a violin concerto, once in an opera aria. So boldly allegro, boldly largo, you know, it's a modifier. It tells you something else emotionally that the composer may wish to, you know, indicate. Now, you also see various kinds of works. There's things called sonatas, variations, ballades, etudes, preludes, rondos. These all require a great deal more study than we could possibly do this evening, but they're just construction features, how the piece is organized. A rondo is the simplest to understand in that it simply means that there's like a refrain and a chorus, in other words, or a verse and a chorus, just like popular music. You hear the verse and then you hear the chorus, and then you hear the verse and then you hear the chorus. So it's an alternating format. So they all mean one thing or another, and that's for another day. You'll also see dance types. Chopin wrote many waltzes. During the Baroque, they loved to write the international dances, bourrées and gavottes that we heard earlier. If this had taken place now, then we'd see words like foxtrot or disco. You know, in other words, they were just dances at the time. We look at these as sort of different because, you know, no one really does the minuet anymore, or the landler, or the gigue, but they did then. The other thing you see on programs is catalogers, people who have decided to spend their lives studying one composer and basically the order pattern in which they wrote their music. If there is no cataloger, the generic is a word called opus. And opus literally means is Latin for work or exertion. So it's a generic cataloging system. It is not a pop song by Cy Oliver in the big band era, although it is that. And he's just having fun with the concept of Opus 1, of course. Mozart has a cataloger named Kirkel, K, and he was a 19th century musicologist, but he was also a botanist, and he made his life study the works of Mozart, and so you'll see Mozart Sonata K some number, and the numbers range from 1, when he wrote his first piece at age 6, until the Requiem, which is K626. So he wrote 626 works, supposedly in the order pattern that Mr. Kirkel has decided that they go in. Now, Schubert has D numbers for Otto Deutsch, and he was primarily an art historian, and he cataloged Schubert's works, and so you see Schubert Sonata D blah blah blah, and that refers to a person who cataloged the works of Schubert. Haydn has Hoboken numbers, H-O-B, for Anthony van Hoboken. There's 750 entries and 1,936 pages, because in his, he annotates and tells you a little bit about each piece. So that's a very long cataloging system. So the next part of our presentation involves something that I put together just for this competition, and Virginia's going to tell you about it as I get my music organized.
So as Marshall's been sharing with us, Mozart was primarily a pianist, although in the early days that would have meant playing on the harpsichord or the organ, and later on the forte piano. Over the course of his lifetime, Mozart wrote several sonatas for the piano, in addition to concerti, music for 2 pianos, for piano 4 hands, sets of variations, and many other miscellaneous works. For our next piece, Marshall has created a medley of some of the most popular tunes from Mozart's piano sonatas, arranged for flute and piano.
Well, thank you so much for listening this evening to the first of these presentations to support the piano competition. And I believe Joran is going to come back now, and we're going to have a question and answer session. People have been able to hit something on their computer and ask us a question. So, Joran.
Yes, so first of all, what a fantastic, performance and presentation. You got so much information here in such a short time. That's absolutely wonderful, and I hope that all our audience was able to capture, at least a large part of what you just said, because it is so useful and will be so helpful when listening to these performances. So thank you so much, and thank you for Virginia as well for these wonderful performances. So we have some wonderful questions here. The thing is that I think some of them maybe belong to one of the next sessions, for example.
We'll find out.
Can a pianist make too many interpretations so that it becomes too far from what the composer intended?
Oh, that's...
And stuff like that, which is like, it's an absolute, or for example, who gets to decide in case of an older piece of music, and how do judges in a competition decide which opinion about how to perform a piece of music is correct? So these are all...
maybe better left to either you or Carolina, but...
So I think these we will answer at a later stage.
Okay.
However, there is one here that I would like you to answer, maybe, that I'm sure everybody will be happy to hear from you, which is, there is a great deal of mystery concerning Mozart's death. It was rumored that he was poisoned by a rival composer. Any truth to that rumor?
Well, Mozart's death is a controversial issue. He, as far as we know, he actually just died from liver failure. But we're not absolutely sure. The reason that the rumors persist is because towards the end of his lifetime, a mysterious woman showed up to clean his house and cook and so forth and so on, and he had no idea who hired her, had no idea where she came from. It was rumored that she was hired by the Masons. He wrote the Magic Flute, which reveals a lot of Masonic secrets, and he was very unpopular for doing so, and it was considered actually that the Masons themselves supplied this house aid, and she slowly poisoned him with mercury. And Otto Deutsch, who I mentioned earlier, is Schubert's cataloger, revisits this whole issue in 1947 at a musicological convention. And we still don't really know. It is often said that maybe Salieri, who's the rival composer mentioned in the question, probably had absolutely nothing to do with any of this. If anything, it could have been the Masons.
Well, thank you so much for that, for this answer. And one more question that, again, it's a wonderful question, but I thought you would may want to answer that, which is, can a pianist make too many interpretations so that it becomes too far from what the composer intended?
Well, I think that's certainly the case. If you listen to Cortot, who was a very famous pianist in the first part of the 20th century, many people were critical of the liberties he took with not only the pedaling, how to pedal or what was marked in the score. He would use unusual fingering patterns, he'd use unusual tempos, and he would have a lot of what's called rubato or flexibility in a performance, and for some this seems too outrageous. In other words, if you take a Bach work and you just do that, do it however you want. Probably someone's going to yell at you that it's not very Baroque in its conception and so forth and so on. But people do what they do. And then that's what judges decide whether or not it was too much.
Absolutely. So, okay, so let's have one last question again, because we have so many wonderful questions here. So, are there any pieces written for the una corda or soft pedal?
You mean exclusively throughout?
I would assume so.
I don't know of anything in print, but there's a couple of pieces from Prokofiev's Vision Fugitive, which are they're very short little fragments, and it's really, really quiet from beginning to end. And I would say most pianists probably use the una corda throughout that, but it's not marked. I don't think it's actually marked. I think it's just something that someone decides to do. And oftentimes you just use the soft pedal. Like I was using a lot of soft pedal because I'm collaborating with Virginia and I don't want to overpower her. So I've got a really big instrument and it's open all the way. Normally I would have played this piece with her with the stick in a lower position to decrease the general volume of the instrument. But with all the microphones and so forth, we couldn't really do that this evening. So I just had to soft pedal a few more moments than usual.
Right. Well, somebody here is asking, what is your favorite Mozart piece to play?
Well, I think my favorite is one that I included. E flat, the slow movement. And mostly because there's so many Masonic elements in that. It's an E flat major, 3 and all. There's a lot of symbolic nature to it, but it's a lovely melody. It's just a lovely piece of music. There's very little Mozart I don't like, so it's a tough question for me to ask. I mean, my favorite piece by Mozart is not a piano work, it's the Magic Flute. That's my favorite of all of the things that he created. So.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for answering everybody's questions,
sure.
or at least some of them.
Right, well, I'm sure we had some more. All right. Yaron, are you signing us off, or am I signing us off?
Well,
come on up, Yaron, and say farewell.
Okay, so I will. Thank you so much for this absolutely fantastic presentation, which I hope gave all of you really like the basic, like a wonderful introduction to this beautiful instrument. I mean, really in such a short time, as I said before, you were able to go through such important things in a performance. And of course, your collaboration together was absolutely wonderful. So next week, we're going to be here with Carolina Altmans, who's going to take our knowledge even one step further. And later on, 2 weeks from now, I'm going to be here with you with the subject of what makes a performance great. So this is how we go. So now we started with a lot of very, very important things to know together with Marshall, of what to know how, about this instrument. Later on, we're going to speak about like color and about style and stuff like that with Carolina, and later on about the actual performance. So
I have one more comment before we finish. The reason that I included this piece tonight, which I wrote just for tonight, was that during the competition, there is chamber music. It's not all solo piano, correct? There's chamber music.
Absolutely.
So you have to learn as a pianist to collaborate and exchange musical ideas, argue, come to peace, come to terms with one another. And that's what makes making music so wonderful. So you've got string quartet and piano, correct? Right.
Yes, so we will have, during the Cleveland International Piano Competition, we're going to have 2 pianos, collaboration with the string quartet, and collaboration as soloists with an orchestra. So that's quite a variety. So we got a wonderful taste here towards what is expected at the Cleveland International Piano Competition, happening from July 9 to August 11. So I hope you're all excited about it as we are. Thank you so much, Virginia. Thank you so much, Marshall. And we look forward to seeing you all next week.
Thank you.